Perfect. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 6th webinar as part of ISDM Knowledge Series. Are you a budding entrepreneur? Do you want to change the world for the better? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 6th webinar. One second, I think we're going to some technical challenge here. Are you a budding entrepreneur? Do you want to change the world for the better? Yeah. Ganapathy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So let's start to know a little bit more about social enterprise. And why not start a social enterprise if you really want to change the world for the better? Today we have Mr. PR Ganapathy with us, who will be talking about the first baby steps you need to take to get your social enterprise going. Many of us want to start a social enterprise to solve a social problem that is dear to our hearts. However, we often face an analysis paralysis situation where we're thinking a lot about the problem, but don't know how to get beyond just thinking about it or researching it. This webinar will give you concrete baby steps that you can take without spending too much of money to get your social enterprise going. Let me give you a brief background of our speaker today. PR Ganapathy has been a venture-funded entrepreneur and funds and mentors social entrepreneurs. Ganapathy has very recently started his new role as Regional Director, heading Stanford's Seed Entrepreneur Development Program in India. Prior to this, he was the president at Wilgrow Innovations Foundation, one of India's oldest and most respected social enterprise incubators. He is actively involved in building the social enterprise ecosystem in India. As a member of the India chapter of ANDE, as a member of the British Council's India Social Enterprise Steering Board, and as a member of the Confederation of Indian Industry Subcommittee on Corporate Social Responsibility. Prior to Wilgrow, Ganapathy was the Managing Director and Chief Executive of DSNL Limited, a pioneer in the teleconferencing enterprise collaboration space. Before DSNL, Ganapathy lived in the United States for 11 years, where he co-founded Gridstone Research in August 2005 and served as the Chief Executive Officer till 2010. Before founding Gridstone, Ganapathy worked with Infosys Technologies and Infosys BPO and was also a member of the Tata Administrative Service. He's an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and Hindu College Delhi University. So let's get started with the webinar. Over to you, Ganapathy.
Thanks a lot, Paribhasha. Welcome, everybody. Good evening.
And Hindu College Delhi University. So let's get started with.
Great. So oftentimes I meet young people who are passionate about a particular social problem and wish to get started, but don't know how to get started. And so when ISDM approached me to do this webinar, I proposed this topic to share some thoughts on how you could, while you're doing other things, while you're passionate about a particular problem, you could begin to lay the foundation for getting started on your social entrepreneurship journey. These things don't happen overnight. They need to be planned. You need to invest some time and effort. And today I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to do that planning, on how to lay that foundation, and how to take those baby steps that will get you started as a social entrepreneur. I have a limited presentation, not too many slides. And so ideally, I'd like to make this an interactive journey where you all ask me questions and I try to give you suggestions that are relevant to the specific situation that you personally may be facing. So let's get started. One of the first things you should do when you're starting along the social entrepreneurship journey is to know yourself. As you may well have read in several situations or sources on the internet and so on and so forth, entrepreneurship is not for the faint-hearted. It is a journey that involves a fair degree of perseverance, lots of ups and downs, more downs than ups in the initial days. And therefore, before embarking on this journey, it will be very useful for you to assess whether you're suitable for entrepreneurship, particularly at that point that you are in your life. So the first thing that I'd like you to assess is whether you have entrepreneurial aptitude. The question is, how do you do that? What is entrepreneurial aptitude? We can spend a whole evening going over that sort of topic. But there are plenty of resources on the internet. So if you just Google entrepreneurship aptitude assessment and look at the sorts of results that you get, you'll find that you get some very good questionnaires. Answer those very honestly and see for yourself what the feedback is. Speak to people who know you, speak to people who've worked with you, bosses, colleagues, friends, faculty members who've taught you, and then ask them for candid feedback about whether they think that you will make a good entrepreneur. Think back to the times when you have faced some difficulties in life. Have you persevered? Have you stuck with the problem? Have you used innovative approaches? Have you been able to co-opt others in the mission of overcome what problem you were facing at that point in time? These are all good qualities of an entrepreneur. So ask yourself the hard question, am I cut out for this? Am I suited for this? Particularly, assess your strengths and your weaknesses. What are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you're not so good at? Nobody is perfect at everything. So there are some people who are good at ideating. There are some people who are good at presenting, at making other people inspired by their vision. There are some people who are good at creative problem solving. There are some people who are good at putting systems and processes in place and taking something to fruition, being practical about something, versus there are others who are good at soaring rhetoric and getting a big vision. So understand yourself, understand what are your strengths and your weaknesses so that you know what you're capable of. And then you can begin to surround yourself with people who can complement you in the areas of your weakness. The next one is, oftentimes people embark on entrepreneurship, but their friends, their family, their loved ones, maybe a girlfriend or a spouse, may not be fully supportive of it at that particular point in time. So another assessment that you should make is my surrounding ecosystem going to be supportive of this journey? If I'm going to need to not earn anything for 3 years, do I have somebody who's going to help me survive, pay for my basic living expenses? A spouse or a girlfriend or a father, or a friend perhaps. So assess those particular points before you take the plunge. Because in the middle of all the challenges that you're going to face as an entrepreneur, you don't also want to have to deal with these challenges that come from the pressures of your friends, family, and loved ones that surround you. You don't want somebody continuously nagging at you saying, oh, you should have taken that job at Infosys, or oh, you should have gone for your master's when you got a chance. What are you doing with this social enterprise? That can be incredibly depressing, especially during the tough times. The next one is the financial situation. Ask yourself what your savings are, or who you can count on for some expenses during this phase, because there will be a phase when you're developing your initial validation of the idea. And while your burn rate may not be high, it is still non-zero. And so you do need somebody or some source of funding to be able to carry you through that phase. So take a hard look at your financial situation. And sometimes it's not a bad call to say that I'm going to work for a few years and save up enough money so that I can take this plunge. You don't have to necessarily take this plunge immediately after you come out of college and when you have almost nothing to your name, or you have heavy student loans and so on and so forth. It might be a good idea sometimes to put yourself in a slightly easier financial situation and then pursue the idea. The most important one is the next point, which is the ability to persevere. And ask yourself about the really hard situations that you have faced and how you have reacted to those situations. And if you're the sort of person who's given up easily, who has chosen a soft path, then maybe you need some more formative experiences to toughen you up, to develop that sense of grit and determination that is very important to entrepreneurship. Because I can guarantee you, you are going to meet a lot of naysayers. Particularly if you're a social entrepreneur, you're trying to solve social problems that perhaps been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And overcoming those problems requires people with a lot of persevering ability, a lot of persevering skill. And so make sure that you have developed sufficient grit, spine, thick skin that you're able to persevere through this. Because taking the leap on the entrepreneurial journey and then giving up in 6 months' time or 9 months' time is no fun for anybody, including yourself. And it could, in the long term, impact your own self-confidence. And so ask yourself really the question whether you have that ability to persevere. The next point is, what problem should you work on? And here I ask people to look deep within themselves and ask themselves the question, what is that problem that I feel really deeply about? Starting an enterprise, particularly a social enterprise, for frivolous reasons is a sure recipe for giving up very quickly or failing. So don't start a social enterprise just because it's a cool thing to do. Don't start a social enterprise just because you read Rashmi Bansal's book and got inspired by it. Don't start a social enterprise because you think you're going to make significant amounts of money. Don't start any sort of enterprise just because you want to make significant amounts of money. Because time and again, we've seen that money is not a good motivator. It doesn't keep you going, doesn't keep you persevering. The fundamental reason for wanting to be an entrepreneur is because you feel deeply about a particular problem and you want to solve that problem. And all of the solutions that you've seen so far are inadequate. And lastly, you feel like you have an approach, an idea, a germ of a thought that can solve that problem in a very different and a meaningful way. That is why you should want to launch an enterprise of any sort, particularly a social enterprise, is because there is a problem that bothers you deeply. So you have to really ask yourself, do I feel deeply about solid waste management? Do I feel deeply about the difference in outcomes in schools, in government schools? Do I feel deeply about the plight of farmers, particularly small and marginal farmers? Do I feel deeply about the lack of energy access in some of our remote villages? And you have to feel so deeply about it that, you cannot get these thoughts out of your head. It gnaws at you, it bothers you, and it bothers you time and time and time and again. So much so that, you really cannot think about anything else. That's when you know that you really feel deeply about a particular problem. The next point is, along this journey of knowing yourself, you would have discovered some of your own strengths and weaknesses. And so as you discover your strengths and weaknesses, it's time to start looking for fellow partners along this journey. And there particularly, you should not be looking for people who are just like you, which is typically your immediate circle, people who went to the same schools, got the same sort of education, and then have the same sort of a background, personality, and so on and so forth, because that's normally the sort of people you gravitate towards. While it's nice to start something with your friends, if you're all, have the same sort of background, you're all wingmates from IIT Delhi or whatever it might be, it means that the complementarity of skills is not coming. If you need somebody with more marketing capabilities, there's no use having a founding team where 4 team members are technically strong. You need to have people with those other skills. So which often means that you have to start getting out of your comfort zone of your immediate circle of friends and acquaintances. And you have to go and start searching for people with a different complementary set of skills, but who feel the same way about the same problem. And so one recommendation that I give a lot of entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs is go join an organization like, for example, the Indus Entrepreneur Network, the Thai network. There are Thai chapters, I want to say, in some 65, 70 cities around the world. And some of them are more vibrant than some others. But essentially, their mission is to provide a forum by which people who are interested in entrepreneurship can come together and to provide uh, access to experienced entrepreneurs who can give back to budding entrepreneurs who are just getting started. And so, if you become a member of something like a Thai network, particularly a Thai chapter that has a social entrepreneurship special interest group, SIG they call it, then you can actually find a lot of like-minded people. So go to their networking events, go to their talks, and then in the networking time, talk about what you want to do. I want to use tablets to, help teachers teach kids who are struggling in a particular concept, because I think personalized learning can only happen if you use technology effectively. So that's now something that you're passionate about. And now you'll begin to find there are people who are interested in the same thing, and get to know those people a little more, find out their backgrounds, their skills, and you may find and you will find co-founders through this means. So try and find co-founders, co-opt people to your mission, particularly those who have complementary skills, the skills that address the weaknesses that you identified in yourself when you did your own strength and weakness analysis. So that's the first phase of it, which is knowing yourself. Who are you? What do you feel passionately about? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Next, once you've decided that, hey, yes, there is a cause that I believe in, I have the basic skills that it takes to make an entrepreneur, I have enough of a financial cushion to be able to take this leap, then that's not enough. Just being passionate about something is not enough to take the plunge into being an entrepreneur. So the next thing you do is invest time in knowing the problem that you want to solve. And how do you do that? How do you do that without money? So the first thing you can do very easily is, in all your spare time, you can immerse yourself in understanding that problem. So for example, you can volunteer. If teaching English in urban slums is something that moves you passionately, because you think that, unfortunately, English is a ticket to prosperity and a good job, and English isn't taught well in affordable private schools or government schools, and you want to figure a solution to that, go to your local Rotary Club and volunteer to teach children through their outreach program. Go to a neighboring government school or affordable private school and offer to help the kids read. Do something that allows you to immerse yourself in and understand that particular problem. The best thing is if you can do it in a structured way over an extended period of time. And so that's where people like Teach for India fellows really get a fantastic opportunity to experience the challenges of education for the base of the pyramid firsthand as class teachers in a government school or affordable private school for 2 whole years and get paid a little bit. But more importantly, get the structured support that they need to understand the problem really deeply. So which is why when I have entrepreneurs who come and pitch to me, if they've been a Teach for India fellow, they've been in the classroom, I find they have a much better understanding of the problem that they're trying to solve, of inequity in education, poor reading levels, or confusion in math, or whatever it might be, because they've taken the time to try and understand that problem. One of the companies that we looked at the firm I used to work at, Wilgrow, was an organization called Forest Health. And Forest Health has a medical device that's designed to test for diabetic retinopathy. The founders of Forest Health spent 5 years volunteering with Arvind Eye Hospital eye camps. So when they began developing their product, they had a really good understanding of what is the situation on the ground, and they could design their product perfectly for the needs of the customer that they wanted to serve. So when you spend your time immersing yourself in the problem, it will automatically make you an expert in that field. Then when you start to speak to people who could support you, donors, investors, and so on and so forth, you will be an expert and you will inspire confidence in them taking a chance on you. So really, you must immerse yourself in understanding the problem deeply, really, really deeply. Talk to a lot of people. So if you Google the informational interview, it is a technique by which you can build a network. So seek out people who know something about the problem you're trying to solve. People who run an NGO that teaches kids, or an NGO that works in the area of cancer screening, whatever it might be that you're passionate about, and seek them out. Go and request an introduction from somebody who might know them, or just write to them out of the blue. You generally find in the social sector, people are very open and very forthcoming, and they will take the time to share some of their learnings with you. Take meticulous notes and make sure that you're constantly processing and digesting the information that they're giving you. So you're really learning from every such informational interview. And every person that you meet, ask them for recommendations of other people you should be talking to. People who are already in the space are people who know other people in the space. So they'll say, hey, go and talk to so-and-so. He is really very experienced in that area. Or, somebody tried to do something similar to what you're trying to do, but failed. Here's his name and his number. Why don't you go talk to him? Those people are the best people to speak to because they've been through this. They've tried to do something. They've failed. And you can learn from their lessons and avoid repeating the same mistakes. Then as you start developing your idea, develop a group of people that can serve as a sounding board and keep going back to them and iterating and brainstorming your idea with that sounding board. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. Here's how I'm thinking of doing it. Here's how I'm thinking of funding it. Here's the business model that we're going to follow. Here are the co-founders that I'm assembling. Here are the sort of value proposition that I've created, and see how they react. And get into it in sufficient detail that you're getting actionable feedback. So you're doing all this while you have a day job, while you're finishing up your studies, but you're working on this with relatively low cost because it's, the occasional auto travel or phone call, that sort of thing that you're using, or buying somebody a cup of coffee, and that's what you're using to really gather all this information. My next suggestion actually may be going a little backwards. Those of you who are itching to start your social enterprise, consider working for a few years in an organization that works in that space. So, especially this is relevant for those of you who've never worked before, come straight out of college. So oftentimes I give this advice to people who've never worked in their lives. They've never hired an employee in their life. They've never seen a budget in their lives. They have no idea how to, pay professional tax, or, what does the GST registration look like? And these are all things that you need to know if you're going to actually be an entrepreneur. So my suggestion to them is, instead of doing all of this, why don't you spend 2 years or 3 years, if you're interested and passionate about cancer screening, go work for an NGO that works in cancer screening. Go work for a social enterprise that has created a product in cancer screening. And you might, if you're passionate enough about it, offer to work for peanuts or even for free, and use that opportunity as a learning experience. Because those 2 years in that company, learning everything there is to learn, will prove invaluable to you later when you start your own enterprise. So starting prematurely with inadequate or imperfect information, and as a result of that failing 6 months or a year from now, versus postponing the decision to start by a year or two, working somewhere and learning a lot about the space, and then starting with a much better idea and with that experience under your belt, and therefore a much higher chance of success, may actually be a much better approach. So give it some thought and ask yourself whether that might be a path that makes sense for you. And my next suggestion is, again, study all the available research. You should have mastered every article, every document that has been written about that particular topic. You should not be surprised once you begin to launch your venture and you begin to speak to investors or donors that there was some work, there was some research, there is a well-documented case study of something that was tried that was similar but failed. And if you didn't know about it, it just means that you didn't do your homework. So again, this is a no-cost or low-cost thing where you can really make use of all of the published research around the world. Somebody may have tried something similar in Latin America. They might have tried it in Eastern Europe. They might have done something in Africa. You should be like a sponge. You should be absorbing every piece of research and information that is out there about this particular problem that you're seeking to solve. Because when you go and meet people, you have to come across as somebody who may not have done it yet, but is as prepared as anybody can be. My next point is particularly see if you can connect with people who've tried to do something about this problem in the past. And if they fail, understand why they failed and spend time really getting to the bottom of that. Really, all of the small mistakes, try and see if you can get to the principles at those organizations and you can learn from them. So you must become as much of an expert as you can become without actually launching your venture. And that is an important phase of exploration, which is no cost or low cost, but will significantly improve your chances of success and improve the probability that you will succeed. My next slide, you've known yourself, you've known the problem. Now, as you've been understanding the problem, you've been developing your solution. So keep developing the outlines of your solution through this process of exploration and keep on testing and iterating this concept with the experts that you're meeting. The sounding board that you've created, tell them, okay, here's what we're thinking about. And you will get specific pieces of feedback. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting idea, but will this be a problem? Will that be a problem? Each one of those but questions is really an opportunity for you to tweak and refine and address that particular concern in more detail. So you should be getting to a point where you have developed, iterated, and tested it in sufficient detail that you have addressed all of these little concerns that have come about. So I had an opportunity to study a lot of social entrepreneurs, particularly in the education space in the US, in the course of a program that we were designing. And one thing that really struck me as amazing between what they did and what I see entrepreneurs in India do is that I found that in these US entrepreneurs, they had developed their solutions in so much of detail on paper before they started, that when they got started, they had thought through lots of things, and so they could just go into execution mode quickly. I'll give you an example. There was an entrepreneur who had created a charter school in Denver and Colorado. And during the planning phase, he had even thought about how the markings on the ground in the school would be made so that the children would go up the stairs in one direction and would come down the stairs in a different direction. And there would be arrows on the ground that would point this out for the children. That's the level of thinking that went into the planning. And so he was documenting all of these things, and he had a thick binder. So when he was ready to start the school, he had thought through everything from teachers to lighting, to classrooms, to layout, to curriculum, to pedagogy, to right down to the way in which the toilets would be built, to the way in which the lunch area would be, with the markings on the floors and so on and so forth. The chances of somebody like that succeeding are significantly more than somebody who just says, hey, we'll figure it out. We're the masters of Jugaad. So as far as you can, think through your plan in sufficient detail and keep on iterating this so that the major risk factors that have been identified by these experts that you're speaking to have been addressed in a thoughtful manner, and you have developed a plan to reduce those risk factors. Okay? So that's the third one. You have understood yourself, you've understood the problem, and now you've developed your solution. Make sure that you have checked the 3 T's that investors or funders look for. The 3 T's are trouble. Is this a big problem? Investors and funders are not interested in solving small, insignificant problems. Because particularly in the social space, the problems we'd like to solve are big. So is this a big problem? Is it deeply felt by somebody? So when your solution appears on the horizon, will they pay to have it solved because they feel this problem deeply? So think through whether the problem that you've identified is a deep problem. Now, you don't necessarily have to boil the ocean and solve all of the world's problems in the first shot. But you have to have a vision for a big problem. You may start off by solving one element of that big problem. Like, for example, you want to eliminate inequity in education, but you're starting with the small problem of the teacher not being able to set customized worksheets and mark questions and collect data in a way that the teacher can use that for analyzing student performance. That's the small problem you're starting with. But that's the starting point for a venture, a social enterprise that's going to do more things in this bigger problem for eliminating education inequity. So you've got to make sure that you have the large and the small vision sorted. Second is, I put it in quotes, technology, which is, what is your solution? What is your idea of how this problem can be solved? So can you show that this is a feasible idea, even though you've not yet started doing it? So point to evidence of what other people have done. Point to your own experience, maybe some low-cost concept testing that you were doing that shows that the solution could work. It has a potential to succeed. The next is, can you produce it? Some people, I've got this amazing device that can, with just people breathing on it and looking at their picture, the camera phone can detect 25 diseases and can do it for free. But, the question is there such a device? Does it work? Can you actually produce or deliver that? And can you do that at scale? And lastly, can you do it at a cost where you can make money if you're looking at a for-profit social enterprise? Or can you do it at a cost where it's reasonable if you're looking for a non-profit social enterprise? So ask yourself about the technology. Does it work? And can it be produced? And can it be done at a reasonable price? And then finally, investors, and oftentimes early stage investors and funders are only taking a bet on 1 and 3. That is, this is a good team going after a big problem. Yes, they have the basic elements of a solution, but it may or may not work, but they will learn, they will iterate, they will modify, and maybe will get a working solution in the course of it. So the big question is this a team that somebody will trust with funding to solve this problem? My own story, in 2004, I had an idea for a startup. I got 3 other co-founders, and the 4 of us tried to raise money in the Silicon Valley. But we didn't have any proof that our solution worked. None of us had been entrepreneurs before, and we didn't have any customer validation or traction, even an indication of interest from customers. And so there was a VC who told us, hey, get me one of these 3 things. And so what we did was we went out and we found a CEO who joined our founding team. And he had been a senior executive at a very respected company. And so suddenly, investors had a lot more confidence in this team than they had before. And so they trusted us with money, and we got our venture off the ground. So oftentimes, it might be your idea, but you, with your lack of experience, may actually be a constraint to raising funding for the enterprise. So it may actually make sense, because an enterprise that is without funding and is not getting off the ground is still creating 0 impact. It may be a good idea to swallow your ego and invite somebody else in to be the CEO of the venture, the face of the venture, and to use that person's credibility and skills and execution capability to give investors the confidence that they're looking for, or funders the confidence they're looking for. And so that is the third D, is that do you have a team that somebody can trust with funding to solve this problem? So in raising funding, here are some suggestions. You can start off with friends, family, and savings, small amounts of money. Take it only from people who can afford to lose that money. Don't take it from your widowed old aunt who's depending on that pension paycheck to pay her monthly rent and buy vegetables. It's not fair, because you're undertaking a risky venture. You should be only taking money from people who are sophisticated enough to understand the risk and are wealthy enough to be able to lose that money without it affecting your relationship with them. Next is, there are lots of business plan competitions that can give you small amounts of money. Some of these give you up to 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 5 lakhs. That could get you started. So if you've mastered the problem, if you've developed a thoughtful solution to the problem, you are passionate about this, you are good at articulating your passion and your understanding of the problem and your solution, you should be able to put together a good pitch deck for a business plan competition. Or go to an incubator. There are incubators in hundreds of educational institutions and other organizations around the country. Some of them offer funding to very, very early stage companies. Somebody like Unlimited in Bombay even offers 2 lakhs of funding to part-time entrepreneurs. So you don't even have to quit your job to get that initial funding. You have, especially at your alma mater, if they have an incubator there, they'd be very excited to fund an alumnus of their institute. And so you can pitch there. The government of India has some fantastic programs if you're in the right space. In biotech, for example, there's an organization called BIRAC that has something called the Biotech Ignition Grant, where they give you 50 lakhs purely on the basis of a concept and a presentation. Then again, there are philanthropic foundations. So if you're in the right space, you'll find there could be a Central Square Foundation or a Gates Foundation that has risk-seeking capital for bold ideas to the problems that matter to them. The Gates Foundation, for example, in saving lives at birth, gives out $100,000 to somebody who is just purely an idea. And so those sorts of things are there. Next is, if you have a B2B model, you might be able to find an anchor customer. And they might be willing to advance you some money to develop the solution. You may have to give them some exclusivity in return, but that could be a way in which you can get the venture off the ground. I've also seen entrepreneurs start off with ancillary services. So there was a company that we funded developing a solar cold storage solution. And they had already generated 3 crores in revenue from solar water pumping consulting. These were young IIT Kharagpur graduates. They understood water pumping, solar energy, and they had spent time advising organizations and farmers doing implementations of solar water pumping solutions. Nothing innovative about it. It's a basic consulting, but they were earning revenue from it. They were understanding that problem from it, and they were generating some surpluses that they could invest in their venture. Use the money very frugally and in a very, very focused manner to hit milestones for the next round of funding. So do not waste the money on anything other than what gets you to the next milestone, because only hitting milestones is going to allow you to play the next round. It doesn't matter if you have a fancy CRM system if you have no customers. So focus on the right things, get to the next milestone, and then you'll be able to raise the next round of funding. Finally, persevere. The first level of perseverance is in getting the venture off the ground. If you believe passionately in something, sooner or later somebody will recognize that, hey, this person's really keen to do something about this. If nothing else, out of credit for your perseverance, you will get funded. And I've seen that happen a number of times. So lastly, always be changing. So this plan that you've developed is only a plan. And as Sun Tzu said, no battle plan survives the first contact with the enemy. No business plan survives the first contact with the customer. So make sure that you have the flexibility to be constantly listening to your customer. Be close to the action. Make changes quickly. You do not have the time to carry employees who are not pulling their weight. You do not have the money or the time to try things that are not working and to give them some more time. Cut, chop, quickly, change direction. Nothing is sacred except the mission at that early stage. And then throughout this process, make sure that you're investing in keeping potential funders informed about what you're doing. HNIs, angels, friends and family, foundations, investors in this particular space. Keep them in the know with regular updates. Put them on a mailing list. Make them subscribe to your Facebook page. And then whenever you're in the same city, drop in and have a cup of coffee with them. Tell them what you're up to. And then you'll find sooner or later they're going to say, hey, you know what? I really like what you're doing. Here's 50 lakhs. Let's see what you can do with this. That's the investment that pays off. And it's the entrepreneurs who make that effort who really reap the benefit. So at that stage, you've got to be prepared to hustle, hustle, hustle. My co-founder at Haktarsha, Aniket Dogar, is a prime example of somebody who took a small amount of funding that I put along with some friends on the table and has single-handedly, along with Asha, our co-founder, built up a very, very solid organization that is, doing something like 5-6 crores in revenue and has impacted tens of thousands of lives so far. Just hustling all the time, chopping, changing, learning, and improving. And that's really the secret for getting things off the ground. So with that, I'm afraid I've taken more time than I thought I would. But I think we have about 15 minutes for questions. So Paribhasha, if you can give them instructions on how they can ask questions, and then I'm happy to take.
Sure. So we are open for questions. Let's give a minute for our participants to write the questions here. and then we can pick up one by one. There's one question, Guns, which says that what are the things that keep potential social entrepreneurs from succeeding to fulfilling their potential?
Yeah. No, I think there are multiple things. I think the first and most serious problem has been lack of entrepreneur perseverance. And so when you encounter difficulty giving up, um, the sometimes there are disagreements within the founding team. Sometimes some of the founders are not as committed as some of the other founders may be. And so they get a job offer, they get a admission to a master's, they have a parent or a girlfriend who complains about the lack of a salary, and the fact that this person's spending too much time on this venture, and then they lose heart and they quit. I think the second is inadequately understanding a problem, being simplistic about your assumptions, not testing things enough. The third is sticking too long with something that isn't working, not changing fast enough. And the fourth is not investing enough in some aspects of the business. And so there are entrepreneurs who don't like fundraising. But hey, I'm sorry, you started a venture. You have a responsibility to raise money for that venture. And there's no simple out. You can't say that I don't like fundraising, I don't like asking people for money, so I'm not going to do it. And magically, the ecosystem should, reward you because you're doing social good. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You still have to go out, seek investors. You have to convince them about the effectiveness of your solution, and you have to raise money from them.
Okay. Thanks, guys. This next question, which says, how much does the pedigree of your academic experience matter? In simple words, what if you are not IITIM? Is it more challenging?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think when we look at team, obviously, somebody who has good education, really, at least, we make an assumption of, the person's not just intelligence, but also their ability to work hard and so on and so forth. But it is far more important to demonstrate mastery of a problem than it is to come with the right pedigree. So the right pedigree may only give you the first meeting, but in that first meeting, if you don't demonstrate that you understand the problem well, that you have an effective solution, that you have the humility to learn from your mistakes in the marketplace, that you have the integrity to be honest about your faults and your problems. If you don't have those things, you're not going to get funded irrespective of the finest pedigree. Investors are much smarter than that. So while it may give you a small advantage in the beginning of the process, subsequently you have to be able to demonstrate your mastery of the problem. We have, especially in social enterprises, people who have experienced the pain, in fact, for me, are much better because their solutions will be very grounded in reality. So there's a wonderful entrepreneur that we had an opportunity to work with, who's based in Neemuch in Madhya Pradesh, and he's just passionate about what he's trying to do, work with organic farmers to grow various types of herbs. And he got funded, and he was, quite the hero, of the investment portfolio, because he understood this problem and he was really passionate about it.
Thank you.
I think, let's move on. There are several questions that are popping up. Yeah.
Yeah, several questions, and I think there's one from Eril, and is asking, how do you decide who would be good candidates to be your sounding board?
Yeah, so I think people who obviously understand what you're trying to do, and so understand the problem or understand the way in which you're approaching the solution. And so if you're going to use AI and ML, somebody who understands AI and ML. So if you came to me and you asked me questions about AI and ML, I wouldn't know, what to tell you. Or problem. So I'm interested in something in education. Do you go and find somebody who's an outstanding teacher in math or whatever that subject that you're trying to intervene in? So the first thing is obviously the knowledge of the problem. The second thing is their openness to spending time with you, hearing you out, and then giving you thoughtful feedback. So one problem sometimes with mentors in India I've found is that they are too ready to jump to giving you gyan, and they're not spending enough time understanding your problem or what you're trying to do before they jump into giving you gyan. So you want people with whom they sufficiently listen before they offer you advice. The third is you want somebody who does not take that advice personally. So you've also got mentors in India who give you advice, and if you don't take their advice, they somehow feel their ego is hurt and then they refuse to, or they start bad mouthing you. So you don't want somebody like that. They want somebody who gives you advice but respects the fact that, hey, you're the entrepreneur finally. It is your decision on whether to implement things in a certain way or not. You must do the courtesy of going back to them and giving them feedback on why you haven't taken their advice, why you chose to do something differently. That's fair. But for them the ego to be hurt because you didn't take their advice is unfortunate. So you don't want that either. You obviously want people with high integrity. So you don't want somebody to take your idea and then after that go off and give it to some other entrepreneur or something like that. So you want people who have good high integrity, will preserve the confidences in which and the confidence in which you're sounding them out and things like that. And then people who have the time to spend with you over maybe 6 months to a year. And so that's an important criterion as far as that is concerned.
Great. Vanita is asking, what are the different ways to test the effectiveness of the business model?
Yeah, so obviously, the final effectiveness will be when the rubber hits the road, when you actually implement it. But there are lean experimentation techniques, and you can look these up. You'll find resources on the internet, whereby through a combination of services or questions, questionnaires, surveys, just rough and ready prototyping, in physical products, you could just take a box and with a marker pen draw a few buttons and show it to people. And the dirtier it is to look at, the more honest the feedback you'll get. If it's really nice and well done, sometimes people don't want to hurt your feeling. But if a little dabba with a few buttons drawn on it and you ask them, hey, what do you think if I gave you something like this? You might get good, effective feedback. You can test pricing that way. Give them fake money and tell them, here are the different features and how much money would you give to each feature. And then you can see then how are they prioritizing the various features in the product and where are they willing to put their money or interested in put their money. So there are lean experimentation techniques that you can use to really test the effectiveness of your business model during those days of experimentation. And these are, again, all things that you can do at very, very little or no cost. But it will give you much more confidence in your solution rather than just plunging in and giving them a product and then testing. So try and use some of these lean experimentation techniques beforehand.
Cool. So the next question is funding related. The participant is saying, my social enterprise has been up and functioning for the past 4 years now. There's no exceptionally innovative idea to it, but it is currently a self-sustained model. I had been trying to raise the funds since the beginning, but never succeeded. Now, when I need to scale up, I'm not eligible to apply for grants and funds at ideation early stage funders. So should I continue seeking fund by registering another NPO to be eligible for that category, or should I just drop the idea of seeking funds?
So I don't think there are some programs that are very specifically restricted and require you to have been incorporated within the last so many years and so on and so forth. But just doing a facade change and starting a new company is not going to solve your problem of raising funding if you don't have a fundamentally game-changing idea in the first place. So, what I would urge you to do instead is reflect on what you've done for the last 4 years and see how you can start doing things differently and innovatively. Because that innovation and that differentiation is really what's going to help you raise funding. If you have an undifferentiated enterprise, even the new enterprise or new legal entity is going to have the same problem. So ask yourself that fundamental question: how can I be more effective? How can I be different and differentiated? Differentiation is different from being different. A differentiation is a valuable difference, something that's valuable to a customer. And there are various programs you can be a part of which will help you think this through and develop a more innovative approach to solving these problems. So that's what I would urge you to do rather than just register another legal entity and then now try to raise funding.
Thanks, Gans. There's another question. So the participant is asking if you can give examples of social entrepreneurship networking circles, incubators, funding business competitions to look out for, any which particularly stand out to you.
Yeah, so the Thai network obviously is something that I found to be very, very effective. But I see lots of incubators that do regular meetups in your city, and you'll find there are, if you go to conferences and things like that, there are groups that get set up around specific subjects. Teach for India, for example, is a very active alumnus network where they are getting together, and they in fact have their own incubation program that is focused on incubating alumni of Teach for India. So depending on the space you're in, try and look for and find such a group. And my other suggestion is, if you've searched and searched and searched and you haven't found anything, maybe you should start one around that particular topic. And that way you'll start bringing like-minded people together. And it's as simple as what the Bangalore Social Enterprise Group did. All they do is they're a mailing list, Google group, so it's free. And they publish that we are meeting on this Wednesday evening at this particular place. And everybody shows up. Nobody's hosting, nobody's paying. Everybody buys their own chai or drinks or snacks or whatever it is. But because you've published a particular date, time, and place, everybody gets together and relationships get built and you find other like-minded people. So you could start your own little special interest group at no cost just by creating a little mailing list of people interested in the subject or a WhatsApp group of people interested in a particular subject.
Okay. Thanks. And there's one very location-specific question, Philemon, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It's asking, how can I get incubators in my city of Bhubaneswar who can guide me and idea?
Sure. So Bhubaneswar, in fact, has a few incubators, but one definitely that you should get into is at the KIT University. KIT University has a TDB and BIRAC funded incubator that in fact also has funding from Wilgrow for a program for entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs working in Odisha and other such low-income states. So you should get in touch with the KIT incubator, or just email invent@wilgrow.org and they'll put you in touch with the folks in Bhubaneswar.
Thank you, Gans. I think there are more questions and I don't think we have more time to address them. Probably we can drop an email to them with the answers, and that can help all our participants.
Sure, I'm happy to take a few more if you're okay with it. But it's up to you.
Okay, so let's take at least one more question here.
Sure.
Yeah, so Ajay is asking, is it necessary to have a clear differentiator in the beginning? I'm interested in education sector and almost everything has been tried in this sector, but I believe this market is big enough to have multiple players.
So, Ajay, the question is, do you want to start a small business or do you want to solve a big problem? Uh, and there's nothing wrong. There's no right or wrong answer in this. Uh, so, doing a proven business model, something that's been tried and tested, replicating that and creating a viable enterprise, having limited impact but being financially sustainable, is actually a low risk way of having impact and creating something that's viable. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. However, if you want to create something that is big and transformative, game changing for a space, you have to be doing something that is dramatically different. But it's perfectly fine, and I think I'm reading between the lines here that this is your question. It's perfectly fine to start with a Me Too model. And then while you're working in a Me Too model, doing something in a particular space, having your antennae all the time tuned to how can I do this better? How can I do this differently? And then tweaking your model, improving, changing. I think that is the secret of entrepreneurship, is that that anxiousness, that almost constant looking out for ways of doing things better or being more effective, that will stand you in good stead. And so even if you don't have a differentiator in the beginning, if you're constantly looking for a differentiator, if you're constantly willing to change and improve, you will find that over time you will create quite a differentiated enterprise.
Thanks, Vin. Can I take liberty of asking one last question, which is posed by Harshita? She says, I'm working with students on waste management problem. We work on creating awareness about segregation of waste. I'm finding it difficult to incentivize the families who have started segregation at their houses. Can you suggest some ideas to incentivize our stakeholders, not particularly to my project, but in general?
Yeah, so, I think, again, if you research this issue and spend some time on just researching behavior change, there's a whole movement around what they call nudge, where, you nudge people's behavior in small ways along the path that you want. So, for example, are you doing enough to celebrate the few people in the community, or doing something small to segregate waste? And are you creating some degree of competition, perhaps, between these various families and things like that? So there's a lot of research that has been done by behavioral psychologists on behavior change at the mass level. And you should be studying those techniques and then applying them to your model and they're very, very small pieces of detail, which if you put into your model, you'll find nudge people along the journey and then get them to change behavior, get them to make it second nature, so that even after your intervention is removed, they continue to do things in a certain way. So just talking to people, just educating kids and hoping that change happens is not going to yield results. You need to do a lot more and be very sophisticated about it. So read some of these techniques, study this book called Nudge, Nudge, by this psychologist, and I forget his name. There's a whole movement of behavior change using these nudge techniques, and try and embed some of those techniques in your work.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Ganapathy. And I'm sure it's been useful to many budding and aspiring entrepreneurs who want to contribute and change the world for the better. Many thanks to all our participants. We'll see you again on 11th December when we have our next webinar scheduled. We'll share the details with you all very soon. Have a very great evening. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.